You already have those student samples that I gave you, so we're not going to spend a lot of time here. These are just some quick student samples from last year. So this one's just formatting. See how we've got the heading up here, a title, a thesis, and then we get into the body paragraphs, right? Um, the thesis here is Ernest Hemingway made a day's wait humorous by his use of miscommunication, slapstick comedy, and witty perspective. So I should see a paragraph about miscommunication, a paragraph about slapstick comedy, and a paragraph about witty perspective. Here are some more thesis statements. I think just before class today, I finished grading the thesis statements that came in. So make sure you look at the guidance. But all of these work out nicely. In the bear boy, the medicine man, the bear cubs, and the mother bear are crucial to make the short story entertaining and educational. Or we've got the short story, The Night the Bed Fell by James Thurber, shows humor by introducing quirky and odd characters, creating misunderstanding between characters, and inducing chaos in the story. Or we've got this one. In The Bear Boy, Haya's father first ignores his son, then learns to become friendly, and ultimately learns to treat his son with love. So this is the progression of the father. What do you notice about these short story titles? How are they handled? Hey, Taylor, no problem. Short story titles are not italicized, they are capitalized, but instead of italics, how are they kind of punctuated? Literally circling it. You can see my pointer, right? Quotation marks. Yeah. Quotation marks. Yep. Okay. Um, let's see. We'll do one body paragraph because again, you've got those student samples. So we'll just look at this body paragraph, okay? Tea is important to her story, The Luckiest Time of All by Lucille Clifton. Tea is important because she reminds her great grandmother of the time she met her future husband. Tea reminds her of this by bringing the dogwood flowers. We know that this act reminds Tea's great grandmother of this because she said, "Ah, now that dogwood reminds me of the day I met your great grandfather, Mr. Pickens, sweet tea." Is this quote plopped in as its own sentence? That's called plunking when that's done, or is it introduced and framed? What do you think? Well, let's take a look. Let's underline the whole thing and see if it's all one sentence. If it is, we have a good introduction and it's integrated um, and framed. What do you think? So we have this little section here that looks like this. We know that this act reminds T's great grandmother of this because she said, yeah, that's a frame. Yeah, I mean, you might want the translation to be a little bit or transition to be smoother, but this is a frame. Okay. So we want to introduce and frame quotes so that they're not just stuck in on their own. All right. Tea is also important because tea is like a little mirror of her great grandmother. She is like that because she wants what happened to her great grandmother to happen to her. These are some reasons how tea is important to her story. And then, of course, you have those papers that you can refer back to in Canvas as well. Okay, let's do a little bit of pronoun review. Um, who, whom, whose, which, and that are those. Okay, let's start here so that we don't get too confused. Okay, we're going to try to decide which one of these is relative and which one of these is interrogative. Remember, interrogative pronouns begin questions, they introduce questions. So, do you think the first or the second box is interrogative? Remember, interrogative is going to introduce questions. So which one do you think introduces the questions? The second one, yeah. So these are our interrogative pronouns. Now, the relative pronouns can be the same with the exception of that instead of what, right? And instead of introducing questions, these introduce adjective clauses, right? Let's go back down to interrogative and make sure we put introduces questions, just in case any of you are screenshotting or taking notes. All right. Okay, now let's decide um, if we have which one of these is indefinite. Anybody know? Indefinite does not have to have an antecedent. It can refer to um, the pronoun does not have to be definite. John says the second. What do you guys think? Are these the indefinite pronouns? Yeah, these are the indefinite ones. We don't have to have an antecedent. Okay, so now let's mark some off just so, again, we kind of have, so we've already done relative and indefinite and interrogative. Let's do personal. Which one do you guys think is personal? Yeah, the third one is personal. What about compound personal? You guys agree? Do you agree with Alex? Is it myself, themselves, herself, itself, yourself? Yeah, because we're kind of putting two words together, right? Which has to mean that this, that, these, and those are demonstrative, right? If you want to screenshot this or finish taking those notes, go ahead and do that before we move on. This is just a quick review of some of the pronoun stuff that we have started just this semester. All right, moving on. Um, Today we are going to turn our focus more to adjectives. And we've started that a little bit just with those relative pronouns, but we're going to really kind of switch gears and talk about adjectives. So, an adjective is always going to modify a noun or a pronoun. So that's like one big hint. It modifies a noun or a pronoun by telling which, whose, how many, or what kind of. If you are a note taker, maybe you put this on a sticky note somewhere. These are the questions that adjectives answer. Now, we're going to talk, like first in lesson 68, about two different types of adjectives. All right, we're going to talk about a limiting adjective, which limits a noun or a pronoun by telling which, whose, or how many. All right. So, still answering those questions. We're just kind of spacing it out by types. Okay. And also a descriptive adjective, which describes a noun by telling what kind of. Okay. So, just the other part of that question. So, let's take a look at what a limiting adjective looks like. Articles like a, an, and the are always limiting adjectives. These are articles, right? But they function as adjectives. Number words are often limiting adjectives. So, like first, second. Indefinite pronouns can be used as limiting adjectives when they tell which or how many. So, again, you got to like think about the questions that are being asked, right? Demonstrative pronouns can be limiting adjectives when they tell which. Interrogative pronouns can be used as limiting adjectives. Again, when we're answering whose, which, or what. And then possessive nouns and pronouns can also fall into this category. So you can see limiting adjectives have a big scope because it answers more questions, right?